Before we start today's episode, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to receive all the latest updates. Our series begins in a studio dedicated to filming reality shows. The show being filmed here is a reality documentary about cases of falling in love at first sight. The studio is filled with working staff and participants, and in one of the private rooms there are diverse guest stars, including an actress, an athlete, and a comedian. They all sit to watch the ongoing events of the program exclusively. At the beginning of the episode, a girl enters the filming location and sits in her place, ready for the program to start. But she looks sick and exhausted, barely able to walk, and yet no one pays attention to her condition. While everyone is watching the show, the girl suddenly bends down and lowers her head, her hair covering her face. The young man, who is supposed to be her partner on the show, approaches her and tries to interact with her gently. But suddenly, she pounces on him in an unexpected way. At first, everyone thinks the scene is part of the show and that they are exchanging kisses, assuming that love has quickly blossomed between them. But the situation changes completely when the young man suddenly collapses on the ground, breathing his last. It becomes clear that the girl attacked him and bit him on the neck as blood oozes from the and her mouth fills with blood. Chaos erupts in the studio and everyone starts fleeing in all directions. And while some of them try to survive, the virus begins to spread rapidly among the people, causing many of them to turn into zombies. The guests of honor leave the studio in a state of extreme panic. They manage to find a car and get in to escape the place. On their way, they start following the news through their mobile phones and social media, discovering that a mysterious virus has spread throughout the entire city, turning the infected into merciless zombies. While they try to come up with an escape plan, the driver interrupts their thoughts by announcing that the fuel is running low and that it is necessary to stop at a nearby gas station. The group feels a sense of anxiety, as stopping could be a big risk, but they decide to take the chance. The driver takes the key with him, fearing that he might be left alone or that the car might be seized and driven away. But as soon as he starts filling the car with fuel, a zombie suddenly appears and attacks him. Another group of zombies attacks the driver, killing him in front of the group inside the car. Everyone panics and realizes that they are now trapped inside the car, which they cannot start because the key is with the driver, who has become a meal for the zombies. Inside the car, the group begins to search for solutions to get out of this predicament. Inside the car, the group begins to search for solutions to get out of this predicament. They notice that the zombies can't see well in the dark, but they rely on sounds to locate the living. They decide to exploit this information to devise a bold plan to retrieve the key from the driver's corpse and refuel the car without being detected. The choice falls on Dean, a brave young man from the group, to be the first person to execute the plan. Dane carefully gets out of the car and tries to reach the fuel tank to fill it, while the others stay inside watching the situation. As soon as Dean starts filling the car, Hong, a man from the group, joins him to undertake the task of retrieving the key from the driver's corpse. And while Hong tries to approach the corpse, the zombies hear the sounds and start moving towards the car. Dane quickly returns inside, but Hong finds himself in a difficult situation and has to throw things away to distract the zombies and keep them away from the car. The attempt fails, and everyone returns to the car terrified, without getting the key or finishing refueling. Necessity drives them to retry, so this time they decide to choose two people instead of one to complete the task, as a form of training to work in a hazardous environment. The two girls, Tsuki and C, are chosen for the mission with the help of Din. The plan improves this time, as Tsuki manages to approach the driver's corpse and successfully retrieve the key. The three of them return to the car with difficulty after dangerous encounters with the zombies, and they finally manage to start the car and move away from the gas station. But during the escape, an unexpected accident occurs as Dean loses control of the car, resulting in a violent crash that takes the life of one of the passengers. Only 5 members of the group remain, who find themselves in front of a large supermarket. The group enters the supermarket in search of shelter and food. Sai helps the injured girl, Ray, who can barely walk, and brings her into the place. Everyone closes the doors behind them, trying to secure themselves from the zombies outside. But they quickly discover that the supermarket is not completely safe. There is a group of zombies wandering inside. Hong faces a dangerous situation as he almost turns into a zombie, but he manages to survive by a miracle. While they search for a safer place, they find a locked room where they discover a group of living humans who had locked themselves in out of fear of the zombies. Hong and the group ask the inhabitants to let them in, but the residents seem very cautious. After confirming that they are not infected, they agree to let them in. The number of survivors increases after these people join the group, becoming 10 individuals. They get to know each other and discover that there are foreigners from different countries among the attendees, brought together by fate in this place. Despite their differences, they unite around one goal: to survive and avoid turning into zombies. They realize that they need food to survive. A decision is made to send 2 members of the group to search for supplies inside the supermarket. The choice falls on 2 young men. The 2 young men manage to gather a good amount of food and put it in a box. But while trying to return the box to the group, the ropes carrying the supplies snap and the food falls to the ground, creating a loud noise that attracts the zombies. The 2 young men try to act quickly, but the zombies attack them. One of the young men is killed immediately, while the other tries to escape but meets the same fate. The group watches the entire incident through the surveillance cameras installed in the supermarket. They are struck by panic and regret for sending the 2 young men to this fate, and a sense of fear begins to take hold of them from taking any further steps. After the shock of losing the 2 young men, the group decides to divide their tasks to search for alternatives for escape and survival. After the shock of losing the 2 young men, the group decided to divide their tasks to search for alternatives for escape and survival. One of the ideas that comes to their minds is to use a closed shopping cart as a means to protect the injured while moving. They decide to implement it by reinforcing the defenses and choosing a safe location until an alternative plan is found. After the shock of losing the two young men, the group decides to continue searching for solutions to stay alive. They start dividing the tasks among themselves, and Hong and Ray are chosen to try to explore the areas surrounding the supermarket. While they are out, they encounter a surprise confrontation with a small group of zombies, resulting in Koa sustaining a serious injury. The group returns inside and finds themselves facing difficult decisions as they fear that Koa might turn into a zombie. They decide to isolate him and tie him in a corner of the room, while Ray, who is also suffering from a minor injury, starts trying to find a way to treat his condition. After a few days, they realize that the zombies have started breaching the supermarket's outer barriers. Suki and C suggest devising an escape plan using a shopping cart to protect Koa and Rai while moving. Everyone agrees to execute the idea, and they start preparing themselves and getting ready to leave. On the day of executing the plan, they attract the zombies' attention away from the supermarket exit using loud sounds and dazzling lights. They manage to get out with great difficulty, but as they move across the street, Ray is spotted by the zombies. Ray sacrifices herself to distract the zombies and give the group enough time to escape. The group continues on their way and reaches a small village that seems isolated from the rest of the city. The group continues on their way and arrives at a small village that seems isolated from the rest of the city. They encounter guards at the entrance who refuse to let them in for fear of spreading the infection. After a lengthy discussion, the guards agree to let them in on the condition that they undergo a medical examination. The examination reveals that Koa has begun to show symptoms of transformation, raising concerns among the villagers. The mayor decides to detain Koa in an isolated place and begins issuing strict orders against the group. They soon discover that the mayor is hiding a dangerous secret. His mother, who has turned into a zombie, is kept in a special cellar, and victims from the villagers are offered to her to keep her calm. This truth puts the group in a state of horror and confusion. They realize that they will not be safe as long as the mayor controls the village. Hong and Din start planning to escape again, but things get complicated when the mayor forces them to carry out a dangerous mission to gather supplies from an area filled with zombies. Despite the dangers of the mission, Hong and Din return safely, but one of the village guards is killed during the operation. Despite the dangers of the mission, Hong and Din return safely, but one of the village guards is killed during the operation. The mayor exploits this event to tighten his grip on the village and begins planning to offer the group as sacrifices to his zombie mother. The survivors realize that it is time to escape, and they devise a plan to set fire to one of the buildings to distract the guards. Their plan succeeds, and they manage to escape the village through a back gate, but they lose Ray, who decides to stay behind to sacrifice herself. The group reaches the outskirts of the port, where they begin searching for a means of survival. In the port, they discover that the rescue ship has left, and they have to wait for another one to arrive. At the port, they discover that the rescue ship has left, and they have to wait for another one to arrive. While they are waiting, they are attacked again by zombies, prompting Dix to sacrifice himself to protect the others. The others manage to reach the second ship and finally escape. On board the ship, the survivors face new challenges as they discover that some passengers are carrying the infection. On board the ship, the survivors face new challenges as they discover that some passengers are carrying the infection. The zombies start appearing again inside the ship, forcing the crew and the survivors to work together to isolate the infected. In the end, the ship heads towards an isolated island believed to be free of zombies, leaving the survivors in a state of anticipation and fear of the unknown. The ship sails slowly towards the island, amidst a state of tension and division among the survivors. Some feel unsafe due to the possibility of infected passengers, while the crew tries to calm things down and organize efforts to contain the situation. During the journey, Dean notices that the ship has started sailing on a strange course, prompting him to go to the control room to discuss the matter with the captain. He discovers that the crew has received an emergency signal from another group of survivors on a small boat, and they plan to change course to help them. Despite the objections of some survivors, the captain decides to proceed with the rescue of the small boat. As they approach, it becomes clear that the boat carries survivors, but many of them are in a deplorable state, and some show signs of injury. The survivors are lifted onto the ship amidst strong protests from the passengers who fear the spread of infection. The situation worsens when one of the new survivors turns into a zombie, causing panic among the passengers. A fight breaks out between the passengers and the crew about how to deal with the infected. Some demand to isolate anyone showing symptoms, while others try to defend them. At that critical moment, Dean takes the initiative to organize the group. He divides the survivors into teams. One team to defend the ship using the available tools, and another team to isolate the injured and secure safe areas for the passengers. Thanks to his leadership, they manage to temporarily control the situation. But the challenges don't end there, as they discover that the zombies have started to spread in the lower parts of the ship. The crew suggests completely separating this part from the rest of the ship, even though it means sacrificing some survivors who are still there. Everyone faces a difficult moment of ethical decisions. The group shows unexpected solidarity as one of the crew volunteers to go down to the lower section to assess the situation and try to rescue anyone who can be saved. After executing the the plan, the ship resumes its course towards the island. After executing the plan, the ship returns to its course towards the island. Everyone feels the weight of the losses, but they realize that they have a new opportunity to survive. The ship finally arrives at the island, where a serene scene suggesting hope greets them. The survivors begin to explore the island cautiously, hoping it will be a safe haven for them. But they realize that their struggle for survival is not over yet, especially with the possibility of new surprises awaiting them in this unknown place. When exploring the island, the survivors begin to gather on the beach to set up a temporary camp. Everyone agrees to divide the tasks. Some take on the search for water and food sources, while others work on building shelters and securing the area. Dean re-emerges as the natural leader of the group, distributing tasks effectively to maintain order. While exploring the jungle, Suki and Dex discover traces of an old camp left by previous survivors. They find remnants of food, tools, and a written note containing warnings about the presence of unknown creatures on the island. This discovery raises the group's concern, as it suggests that the island is not entirely free of dangers. In the following days, the group begins to notice strange behavior in some of the island's wildlife. In the following days, the group begins to notice strange behavior in some of the wild animals on the island. They show signs of an infection similar to that which affects humans. They quickly realize that the virus has spread to other creatures, making the threat greater than they expected. The survivors try to adapt to the situation, but the tension escalates when Dix disappears during one of the night guard patrols. Dean and his team launch an intensive search operation to find him. In the end, they find him with fatal wounds, but he manages to warn them before he breathes his last. The infection is here. Not as you think. Not as you think. The survivors begin to rethink their plan to live on the island. Dean decides to organize a broader exploration of the island to determine the source of the infection and ensure that other areas are free from threats. During this expedition, they discover an old facility hidden deep within the jungle. The facility contains an abandoned laboratory and tools, indicating that the island was the site of scientific experiments on the virus before its outbreak. They find recordings that show the scientists tried to develop a cure for the virus, but the experiments got out of control, leading to the infection of the workers and surrounding animals. With this discovery, the survivors realize that the island is not the safe haven they had hoped for. Dean returns with the information to the rest of the group, and they begin discussing their future plans. Some suggest trying to repair a small boat they found on the beach to escape the island, while others prefer to stay and face the dangers. The survivors eventually decide to split into two groups. One stays on the island to try to find a cure using what they found in the lab, and the other risks returning to the sea to seek help. At the last moment, the sailing group sets off under the leadership of Tsuki, while Dean stays on the island with a small team to continue the search. The text ends with an emotional scene where Dean looks towards the horizon, realizing that their journey for survival is not over yet, but it might have restored their hope. Thanks for your watching. See ya.